He broke the alien law. Now he's bound to their outcast. Princess Elias Carter had worked among the stars longer than he cared to remember. The trade station was a floating city in the void, built by an alien empire whose rules were as cold and precise as the metal walls themselves. Humans were rare here, considered strange tools or laborers, useful for their hands and brains, but never trusted. Elias had learned to move quietly, to follow rules, and to stay invisible. It had kept him alive. That morning, the station hummed with a low, mechanical rhythm. Lights flickered as cargo ships docked in orderly lines. Guards, tall and angular with their gray carapaces polished to a shine, patrolled in silence. Their eyes glowed faintly, a mark of the Empire's control over every corner of life. Elias adjusted the strap of his tool bag and stepped into the inspection hall. He was summoned by the central office, a rare honor for a human, though he knew better than to feel proud. The alien supervisors observed everything. One misstep could mean exile or worse. The hall was massive, a cavern of steel and glass. A long platform stretched across the center, and at its head stood a council of elders, their robes glinting with strange symbols. They moved with slow, deliberate precision, each gesture measured. Above them, a screen projected the Empire's insignia, a star encircled by lines that represented control over all life. "Carter," a voice called, flat and emotionless. One of the alien elders stepped forward, his limbs bending at odd angles, giving him a spider-like grace. "You are needed at the main conduit. Do not delay. Errors will not be tolerated." Elias nodded and hurried toward the conduit. It was a massive structure, glowing with pulsing energy. His hands instinctively scanned the surface, checking for faults. He worked efficiently, listening for the soft hums and clicks, feeling the vibrations through his gloves. And then he heard it, a faint, uneven sound, a groan almost lost beneath the machinery. He froze. Humans had better ears for these subtle noises. An instinct told him someone was in trouble. He traced the sound, moving toward a shadowed corridor just off the main platform. There, huddled against the wall, was a figure unlike any he had seen before. A small alien woman, barely taller than a child, shivering under a tattered cloak. Her skin was pale silver, almost luminous in the dim light. Her hair fell in dark waves over her shoulders, covering her face. She was alone. Elias took a step closer and she flinched. "Hey, are you okay?" His voice sounded strange even to him, soft in the cold hall. She didn't answer. Her body shook and he could see her lips move, forming silent words. Something was wrong, more than cold or fatigue. She pressed a hand to her chest, and a faint pulse of blue light escaped through her fingertips. Elias hesitated. He had been taught never to touch the alien hierarchy, especially not royalty. The law was clear. No outsider may touch royal blood. It was an ancient law, repeated in warnings and engravings across every station. To break it meant death, or a punishment worse than death. But he couldn't just stand there. The human part of him, the part that still remembered what it meant to be alive, to feel empathy, forced him to act. "Here," he said, kneeling carefully beside her. "Let me help you." The woman's eyes snapped open. They were silver like polished metal, but something in them was soft, scared, almost pleading. Her hand trembled as she reached for the wall, trying to push herself upright. Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder. His gloves were thick, but he felt a spark, a strange warmth like energy itself reacted to his touch. She gasped, eyes widening in fear. You should," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I know," Elias said, ignoring the warning bells ringing in his mind. I can't leave you like this." Her eyes darted toward the corridor. A shadow moved. Guards. They were coming, their long legs moving with a precision that chilled him. "Quickly," she said, voice urgent now. "If they see," she faltered, her words catching. Elias lifted her gently, supporting her weight. She was surprisingly light, but her body seemed weak, almost like she could crumble if not handled carefully. The corridor was narrow, forcing them to move slowly. Every step echoed, and every echo seemed louder in the silence of the inspection hall. As they reached a junction, the first guard appeared. Tall, angular, his glowing eyes scanning the corridor. Elias froze. He had no plan. The laws of this empire were absolute. Any human interference with royalty was forbidden, and these guards would not hesitate. Then something unexpected happened. The woman whispered a word he couldn't understand. A soft pulse of light spread from her chest, flowing along his arms. For a moment he felt no fear, only clarity, a strange connection that seemed to shield him from panic. The guard stopped, tilting his head as if sensing something. And then, impossibly, he moved aside, muttering in a language Elias did not know. "Go," the woman said, barely above a breath. "They can't touch you, not yet." They moved past the guard, deeper into the corridors. Elias' mind raced. Who was she? Why did the guard step aside? And what had just happened with that pulse of light? Finally, they reached a small maintenance room, unused and dark. The woman sank onto the floor, breathing heavily. Elias set her down gently, still holding her hand. "You're alive," she said, staring at him, voice trembling. "Do you know what you've done?" Elias shook his head. I don't know, I just helped you." Her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else, relief, maybe hope. You touched me, you broke the law." Elias froze. "The law? I didn't know. The Empire has rules," she said, her voice low, urgent. "Rules that even the elders do not fully understand. One touch, one act of kindness, and you are bound." "Bound," he repeated, confusion twisting his stomach into knots. "Yes," she said, gripping his hand tightly, "by the ancient law. A human showing compassion binds themselves to me, for life. You do not leave, you cannot." Elias' heart pounded. The words made no sense. The Empire was cold, methodical. Laws were punishments, not chains of fate, but the fear in her eyes told him she spoke the truth. "Then what happens now?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. She hesitated, then whispered, "They cannot kill you. Not yet, but they will try to separate us. And if they succeed, I will be hunted again. You will be hunted too." The gravity of the moment hit him like a wave. He had broken a law he did not understand, binding himself to someone who was already a ghost in the Empire's memory. And now, both of their lives hung in a balance he could not predict. A loud alarm suddenly blared. Red lights bathed the room in harsh color. Guards shouted in alien tongues, boots pounding on the metal floors. Elias grabbed a wrench from his bag, holding it defensively. The woman stood slowly, her eyes glowing faintly with determination. "They are coming," she said. "You have to trust me." Elias nodded. Trust was all he had left. They slipped through a side passage, narrow and dark, moving like shadows. Every corner seemed to hide a patrol, every echo a potential trap. And yet somehow they moved undetected. The woman led him with a confidence that belied her small frame. Finally, they reached a room filled with old machinery, dusty, unused, forgotten. She pressed a button and a panel slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. "Stay here," she said, her voice firm. "I will delay them. You cannot fight the Empire, Elias. Not yet, you can only survive." He wanted to argue, but something in her eyes stopped him. There was a fire there, quiet but fierce, that reminded him of humans on Earth, resilient, unyielding, defiant. Minutes passed. Outside, the sounds of pursuit echoed faintly. Then silence. Elias sat in the shadows, heart still racing. His mind replayed the moment over and over. The collapse, the touch, the pulse of light, her words, bound for life. The phrase seemed impossible, yet undeniable. When the panel slid open again, the woman returned. She moved closer, eyes scanning the room as if reading his thoughts. "You are alive," she said softly, "and you are mine, in ways the Empire cannot touch. You do not yet understand what this means, but soon you will." Elias looked at her, confused, fearful, but something else stirred inside him, curiosity. There was mystery here and danger, yes, but also purpose. He had acted without thinking, without care for rules. And now, for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. "Then what do we do?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. She smiled faintly, a small, almost imperceptible curve of her lips. "We survive," she said, "and then we change everything." Outside, the alarms faded, replaced by the steady hum of the station. But in that hidden room, a human and an outcast princess had just begun a journey that would shake the Empire and the galaxy forever. Elias didn't know what the future held. He only knew one thing: he had broken the law. And by doing so, he had bound himself to a destiny far larger than he had ever imagined. The stars outside seemed to shine brighter than before, as if witnessing the birth of something impossible. A bond unbroken by rules, unbent by fear, a human and a princess, standing together in the shadow of an empire that believed it controlled all. And for the first time in his life, Elias felt ready for anything. Elias awoke to a dull hum of machinery. Light filtered through the cracks in the hidden room, painting the walls in pale streaks of silver. His muscles ached from the long hours of hiding, but the fatigue was nothing compared to the unease gnawing at his mind. He had no idea what awaited him beyond the walls of this forgotten room. Every thought returned to the words of the small alien woman: "You are mine," in ways the Empire cannot touch. Beside him, she stirred. The princess, Salith, he now knew her name, sat upright, her silver hair tumbling over her shoulders. She glanced at him with those sharp, metallic eyes that seemed to see through the layers of his very being. There was a calm strength in her posture, but also a shadow of fear. "You're awake," she said softly. "Good, you need your strength, they will come again soon." Elias nodded, swallowing hard. I still don't understand. What exactly did I do? What does it mean to be bound to you?" Salith's gaze softened, though only slightly. "The law is old. Older than the Empire itself. It was created to protect those who are outcast, those who the Empire has declared lost. When someone from outside, like you, shows true compassion, the bond activates. You are tied to me now, not by choice, not yet by understanding, but by law." "By law," Elias repeated, tasting the words like bitter metal. "So they can't kill me." "No," she whispered, "not easily. But the Empire will try to separate us. They will test the law, push it to its limits, and if they succeed, it could cost us both." The weight of it pressed down on him. He had acted instinctively, guided by simple human empathy, and now his life was no longer his own. A strange mixture of fear and pride swelled inside him. Humans, he realized, did not always follow rules. They created their own, guided by conscience. That simple defiance had changed everything. From the corridor outside, a soft clanging echoed. Footsteps. The patrols had begun their search again. Salith's hand went to the wall, pressing a hidden switch. A panel slid open, revealing another passage. "Follow me," she said. "We must move. Staying here too long is dangerous. I know these passages. They will not find us immediately." They slipped into the hidden corridor. The walls were narrow and cold, the lights dim. Elias struggled to keep up, every sense alert. His hands grazed the walls, brushing against exposed wires and cooling metal pipes. Salith led with a quiet confidence, her small frame moving as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Minutes stretched into hours. The station's hum changed as they moved further from the inspection hall. It was quieter here, the machinery older, less maintained. Dust floated in the shafts of light and shadows played tricks on the walls. Why are you exiled?" Elias asked, breaking the tense silence. Salith paused, her back straightening, and a flicker of pain crossed her features. "I questioned them. The Empire claims perfection, but it is built on fear. I refused to stay silent when I saw cruelty. I was stripped of my name, declared dead, erased from every record. They wanted to make me a ghost." Elias' stomach churned. He had read about alien hierarchies before, but nothing could have prepared him for the cold, calculated cruelty of a society willing to erase one of its own. "And now, you are alive," he said. "And I've made it worse." Salith shook her head. No. You have made it possible that I might survive. The law is ancient. It protects us in ways the Empire does not understand. You have made me untouchable. Elias tried to imagine how something so simple, a touch, a gesture of care, could cause fear in a civilization that prided itself on control. Humans were fragile, yet he felt a strange surge of pride. Perhaps there was something powerful about humanity they had not yet understood. They reached a larger chamber filled with unused cargo and broken machinery. It smelled of oil and rust. Salith motioned for him to sit. They will search every corridor, every room, every hidden space they can find, she said. But there are limits. The law I am bound to, it cannot be broken, not by them, and that is our strength. Elias ran a hand through his hair, still trying to process. So, what now? We just hide. Salith's eyes glinted with determination. No, hiding is temporary. We survive now, but soon we must move forward. We cannot let the Empire continue unchallenged. They have built everything on fear, on control, on erasing those they fear. That stops with us. But first, we must understand the law and how it works. Only then can we plan. Elias studied her face. There was a fire there, quiet but undeniable. Humans had something similar, an instinct to protect, to fight for what was right, even when odds seemed impossible. And in that moment he realized that his bond with Salith was not a curse. It was an opportunity, a dangerous, terrifying opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. The first alarm came in the evening. Red lights flashed through the hidden chamber, and the hum of the station shifted as patrols increased their search. Salith pressed a hand to the wall, sending a pulse of light through the conduits. It was faint, almost invisible, but Elias felt a strange warmth in response. "They will come," she said calmly. "Stay close, and remember, do not act without thinking. Every step counts." The patrols arrived moments later. Heavy boots echoed in the corridor outside. Aliens with angular limbs and glowing eyes scanned every space. Elias and Salith crouched behind a stack of cargo, breath held. A patrol officer's shadow fell across the doorway. Time seemed to stretch. Elias' hands were sweaty, gripping a wrench tightly. The officer paused, scanning the room. Salith whispered a word and the officer's gaze faltered. He tilted his head, muttered in his language, and walked away. Elias exhaled slowly, barely daring to move. How did you do that?" "The law," she said. "It protects us. But it is not magic. It is the principle of binding, of empathy. It works because the Empire cannot fully understand it. They fear it, and that fear gives us space to survive." Hours passed. Outside, the station moved in a rhythm of controlled chaos. Humans, aliens, and machines all coexisted, unaware of the small rebellion unfolding in a forgotten chamber. Elias listened to the station, noticing details he had never before. The subtle shifts in machinery, the faint murmurs of distant voices, the quiet sound of life in the void. For the first time, he felt a strange connection, not just to Salith, but to the universe around him. Humanity, he realized, was not meant to dominate through fear or strength alone. Sometimes, a single act of compassion could shake an empire. Salith finally spoke after a long silence. "You must rest. Your mind is racing, but you will need clarity. Tomorrow, we begin to move. We cannot stay in one place for long. The Empire will adapt, and we must always be ahead." Elias nodded, though sleep was distant. His thoughts were filled with questions, about the law, about Salith, about what awaited them beyond the station. Yet even as fear gnawed at him, a spark of determination burned brighter. Humans did not give up. They adapted. They endured. And somehow he knew they could succeed. The night passed slowly. Outside, the station spun silently through the void, stars glittering like distant eyes watching everything. Salith slept fitfully, her hands moving as if she were dreaming of battles yet to come. Elias stayed awake, listening, learning, planning. When dawn finally broke through the cracks of the chamber, it brought with it the sounds of the station waking, sirens, engines, and distant voices. The Empire would not rest. Neither could they. Salith rose and stretched, her movements precise and controlled. "We move at first light," she said. "The Empire will test us today. They will push boundaries. We must be ready." Elias stood, shoulders stiff but resolve firm. "I'm ready," he said. "I don't fully understand the law, but I'll follow you, wherever it leads." Her eyes softened just for a moment. "That is all I ask. Trust and courage. The rest will come." And with that they slipped into the hidden corridors once more, two figures bound by law, fate, and the fragile power of compassion. Every step was a challenge. Every shadow could be an enemy. Yet Elias felt a thrill he had never known. For the first time he was part of something larger than himself, something that could change the course of the Empire and perhaps the galaxy itself. The patrols would come. The Empire would react. But Elias and Salith were no longer alone. Together, bound by something older than fear, they would face the darkness ahead. And somewhere deep in his chest, Elias felt the stirrings of hope, humanity's quiet, unyielding flame, ready to burn brighter than any empire could ever extinguish. The stars outside were indifferent, but inside that hidden chamber, two lives had intertwined in a way no law could undo. And the galaxy would soon take notice. The hidden corridors of the station smelled of metal and dust, a constant reminder of the Empire's control. Elias followed Salith silently, his steps careful yet determined. The pulse of the station echoed in his ears, rhythmic and mechanical. It was a sound he had come to understand in ways only a human could, a rhythm that spoke of order but also of weakness. Salith led him through passages that were narrow and seldom used. Small vents carried sounds from the main halls, the distant shuffle of boots and murmur of voices, all signaling that the Empire had begun its search in earnest. Patrols had increased overnight. Their movements were deliberate, precise. They expected the outcast princess to be hunted and a human to be punished for breaking the law. Elias could feel the tension building in the air. Fear had settled in his chest, but he refused to let it control him. Humans were unpredictable, and unpredictability, he thought, was sometimes more dangerous than brute strength. "They will not stop," Salith said, her voice low and calm. "The Empire does not forgive. They do not understand the law that binds us. To them you are a threat, and I am a reminder of their failure." "I know," Elias replied, "but they don't know what humans are capable of either. They don't understand compassion or courage." She glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Perhaps they are beginning to learn." Their journey led them to a storage bay far from the main inspection hall. Here, machinery lay abandoned, and crates of supplies formed a labyrinth of concealment. Salith moved with a grace born of necessity, leading him to a corner where sunlight filtered faintly through a crack in the wall. "This will be our base for now," she said. "We cannot stay hidden forever. The Empire will adapt, learn our movements. But here we can plan and we can prepare." Elias sank onto a crate, exhaustion pressing on him. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. "I've broken the law, I'm bound to you, and now we're supposed to survive against the entire Empire." Salith crouched beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was steady, grounding. "Survival is the first step. Everything else comes after. The bond you have activated is powerful. It protects us because it is ancient. The Empire cannot erase it, not fully. That is why they fear it. That is why they will try to destroy us." Elias studied her face, the pale silver skin catching the faint light. "How does the bond work exactly? I mean, what am I supposed to do?" She hesitated, her eyes narrowing as if measuring how much to reveal. "The law binds your life to mine. Your actions now affect me and vice versa. You cannot abandon me and I cannot survive without you in some ways. The bond is subtle at first, but it will grow stronger. It is both protection and responsibility. That is why they cannot harm us without risking chaos." He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the words. It was more than survival. It was a connection that transcended the Empire's rules. Humans were often underestimated, he realized, because their strength lay not in force alone but in the bonds they formed. The silence stretched, punctuated by the distant clatter of patrols. Then, unexpectedly, Salith spoke again. "Do you understand why I was exiled?" Elias nodded. "You said you questioned them, the Empire. You saw cruelty they did not want to acknowledge." "Yes," she said. Her voice was firm now, a quiet fire beneath her calm. "I could not remain silent while injustice ruled. I spoke and they erased me. But they cannot erase the law. That is why you are here. That is why the bond exists. The Empire created the law, yet they cannot control it. Compassion, empathy, it is their weakness, but it is our strength." Elias felt a surge of pride. He had acted instinctively, following what humans called morality, and now that act had become a shield. Perhaps this was what humans could offer the galaxy: courage, unpredictability, and a refusal to ignore injustice. Suddenly, the ground trembled lightly. The faint hum of machinery shifted, becoming more insistent. Salith froze, listening intently. Elias followed her gaze, trying to detect any threat. "They are moving," she whispered. "A squad of enforcers is coming this way. We need to be ready." Elias' hands tightened around a wrench he had picked up earlier. "Ready how? We're outnumbered. They have weapons, authority. And we have each other," she said simply. "That is more than enough if you understand how to use it." The first patrol entered the storage bay moments later. They were larger than the guards they had encountered before, armored, their limbs shining with polished metal. Their eyes glowed red, scanning the bay. Elias' heart pounded. One wrong move and everything could be over. Salith's hand brushed his arm. A pulse of light ran through him, faint but unmistakable. He felt a strange clarity, a calmness amid chaos. Humans often fought under fear, yet fear was a tool, not a shackle. Elias realized that instinct and intuition could sometimes outmatch rigid order. The patrol paused near a stack of crates, their leader tilting his head, sensing something unusual. Salith whispered again, and for a moment the patrol seemed uncertain, hesitant. They exchanged glances, and then, surprisingly, the squad moved past without noticing them. Elias exhaled slowly, gripping the wrench tightly. "I still don't understand how they can just let us be." "The Empire fears the law," Salith explained. "They do not understand it, so they hesitate. Fear of the unknown is a weapon we can use, but we cannot rely on it forever. We must act, or the Empire will eventually find a way to control us." For hours, they moved through hidden corridors, avoiding patrols and learning the rhythm of the station. Elias noticed patterns in their movement, the way the enforcers communicated, the subtle signals that passed unnoticed by anyone but those who truly observed. By midday, they reached a maintenance chamber far from the main halls. The air was cool, and the hum of machinery provided a constant reminder of life within the station. Salith motioned for Elias to sit on a crate. "We must talk about the Empire's weaknesses," she said. "Not their weapons, not their strength, their fear, their obsession with control. That is where we can find our advantage." Elias nodded, his mind racing. Humans often thrived in situations like this, not through sheer force, but through creativity, empathy, and courage. He realized that the Empire had never faced anything like him. They had never faced a human willing to act without fear, guided by compassion. "We start small," Salith continued. "Gather information, test their limits, protect those who are forgotten. You and I together, we are more than they expect." Hours turned into days. Elias and Salith began to understand each other better. The bond between them, subtle at first, became more tangible. Elias could sense her moods, her fears, her determination. Salith, in turn, learned to trust his instincts, his understanding of machines and strategy, and his unwavering courage. One night, as they rested in the chamber, Elias spoke quietly. "Do you think the Empire will ever understand humans, or us?" Salith smiled faintly, a glimmer of warmth in her metallic eyes. Perhaps not, but they do not need to understand. They only need to fear what they cannot control, and right now that is us. The days that followed were a delicate dance. They moved through shadows, avoided patrols, and learned the rhythm of the Empire. With each step, Elias grew more confident, more certain of their bond and the strange power it held. The Empire's rigidity was its weakness, and he intended to use it. Then came the day of the first confrontation. A group of enforcers had cornered them near an access hatch. Their leader, tall and imposing, advanced with deliberate steps, eyes glowing red. Elias tightened his grip on the wrench, muscles coiled for action. "You cannot escape," the leader said, voice mechanical, almost emotionless. "The law has been broken. You will be punished." Salith stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You fear the law you do not understand," she said calmly. "We are protected. You cannot harm us without risking the balance you do not comprehend." The tension in the corridor was palpable. The enforcers hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Elias realized that their fear of the unknown, their inability to understand the bond, had become his advantage. He took a deep breath. "Then maybe it's time you learned something," he said, stepping beside Salith. Humans often acted boldly when cornered, and in that moment he felt the truth of his own courage, something no empire could erase. The enforcers faltered. The corridor echoed with the hum of machinery, the distant steps of patrols, and the quiet power of two beings bound by law, fate, and the courage of the human spirit. For the first time, Elias understood what it meant to truly defy the Empire, not through weapons, not through numbers, but through bravery, intelligence, and compassion. And he knew this was only the beginning. The bond between him and Salith had grown stronger. It was no longer just protection. It was partnership, trust, and the spark of something greater than either of them had imagined. Together, they were a force the Empire had never reckoned with. Outside, the station moved on, unaware that the seeds of change had been planted. Inside, two figures stood together, ready to face whatever came next. And in the heart of the Empire, humanity had made its first mark. The station's corridors no longer felt safe. Every shadow seemed to hide a patrol, every distant hum could signal discovery. Elias and Salith had grown more confident since their first defiance, but now the Empire was adapting. Their every move was being watched. The alarms had become more frequent, the patrols more aggressive. Salith led Elias through a maze of maintenance tunnels to a hidden observation deck. From there, they could see parts of the main halls below, the bustling activity of the station continuing as if nothing were amiss. "The Empire believes control is absolute," she said, her silver eyes scanning the distant corridors. "But it is not. We can disrupt them. We just need to be careful." Elias nodded, thinking of the small victories they had achieved, avoiding patrols, testing the limits of the binding law, and surviving against the odds. He had begun to understand the subtle strength of humanity, the courage to act, even in impossible situations. "Today we take the next step," Salith said. "We will reach the central command console. We need information, leverage, anything that can give us an advantage." The journey to the central console was perilous. Patrols roamed constantly, and any mistake could reveal them. Elias and Salith moved silently, relying on the bond and their growing trust. When a squad of enforcers appeared ahead, Elias' pulse quickened. He glanced at Salith, who nodded ever so slightly. Together, they slipped into a nearby maintenance shaft, barely avoiding detection. Once inside, Elias whispered, "Every action we take now will have consequences. We have to be smart." Salith agreed. "We are outnumbered, but the Empire cannot predict courage, human intuition, or compassion. That is our strength." Reaching the central console required cunning. They disabled sensors, used old maintenance passages, and avoided cameras. Every moment was tense, the hum of the station echoing through the empty shafts. When they finally arrived, Elias accessed the console, fingers flying over alien controls. Salith watched, her expression unreadable. Information flowed across the screens: patrol routes, hierarchy of the command structure, and records of the exiled and oppressed. Elias' mind raced. This was more than intelligence, it was a weapon of knowledge. "Look at this," he said, pointing at a map of hidden supply lines and weak points. "We can strike indirectly, hit them where it hurts without confronting their full force." Salith's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. The Empire thrives on control. If we disrupt supply, communications, and trust, they will falter, and their fear of the law binding us will slow their response." Hours passed as they gathered every piece of usable data. Then a distant alarm signaled that their absence had been detected. They knew the Empire was closing in, and time was running out. Elias and Salith moved swiftly, carefully retracing their steps. But when they emerged from a corridor, a group of enforcers blocked their path. Elias tightened his grip on a tool he had brought as a weapon. Salith's pulse glowed faintly, the energy from the law creating a subtle barrier between them and the patrol. The enforcers hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Their fear of the unknown worked in Elias and Salith's favor. "Go," Salith whispered. Elias followed, sprinting through the corridors. They slipped into a vent just as the enforcers gave chase. For the first time, they were not merely surviving, they were striking, using knowledge and courage to outmaneuver a superior force. When they reached a safe chamber, Elias exhaled deeply. "That was too close," Salith nodded. "The Empire will escalate. We must be ready." Over the next days, they planned carefully. They used the information Elias had access to disrupt patrols, reroute supplies, and communicate with those who had suffered under the Empire's rule. Slowly, whispers of hope began to spread. Small acts of defiance, coordinated and clever, inspired the oppressed. Elias realized that humanity's strength was not in brute force but in ingenuity, empathy, and moral courage. Every act of defiance, every choice to help others, shook the Empire's confidence. And every time they survived a patrol or outsmarted the enforcers, the bond between him and Salith grew stronger. Finally, a breakthrough came. One of the Empire's hidden messages revealed that they feared the binding law itself. The enforcers hesitated, uncertain how to act without violating the ancient rule. Elias understood the power they held, not just as individuals but as symbols of courage and compassion. "Humans are dangerous," Salith whispered. "Not because of strength but because they act without fear of rules that are unjust. That is why we survive." Elias nodded. "Then we keep moving forward, and we keep showing the Empire what they cannot control." Their defiance became bolder. They sabotaged key systems without being detected, rescued imprisoned workers, and exposed lies the Empire had tried to hide. Each victory, small but meaningful, inspired hope. And with each act, the bond between human and princess solidified, growing into a partnership that was unbreakable by fear or law. The Empire could not touch them without risking chaos. And Elias, once a simple engineer, understood the true power of humanity: the courage to stand, the will to act, and the compassion to protect those who could not protect themselves. The station continued to spin in the void, but within its walls, a new force had emerged. One human, one outcast princess, and the ancient law binding them together, an unpredictable, unstoppable symbol of defiance. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity could change everything, not with weapons, but with courage, intelligence, and the refusal to bow to fear.